All right. Thanks everybody for joining the last meeting of our ROS community meeting of the year. Today is December 20th, and probably a lot of you are already on in there half in Christmas break, half finishing off stuff, as I heard. So, but it would be nice to kind of like round the year off with like a nice reflective back of what we've done so far this year, and to discuss what we're going to do in the future. So here we go. It's probably not going to be a very long meeting today, but we also have perhaps we can do like an online Christmas party after that, after the meeting is over, in Mozilla Hubs. Let's see. So just to kind of vary the agenda for today, just announcements, which is going to be very short. The retrospective, the looking back, the looking forward, conclusions, the next meeting. Very, very easy and simple. So right now, I actually don't really have any announcements so far, except for Christmas almost here. um, is there anybody that likes to share anything about what had happened, or maybe want to share about, for instance, Mayank, you went to ROSCON India. How was it?
Amazing. It was a lot of fun. I got a lot of positive feedback on my talk as well. And I met some really cool people who are doing stuff with aerial robotics but weren't aware of this working group. I met a guy who wrote like a multi-agent simulator with like a very simplified quadrotor model, and I told him, encouraged him to like join the group and come over. I saw a bunch of other people doing some cool stuff like image enhancement for underwater robotics, which might be useful in other spaces as well. And yeah, overall, it was amazing to see 1,000 people show up whom we hadn't interacted in person before. And the event was much larger than anybody anticipated. And it was great to see the entire community meet with so many people making cool robots. And like, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys were around for the first ROSCon, but this is our first ROSCon, so it was crazy.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, no, I missed all the ROSCONs this year, unfortunately. But 1,000 people, that's even larger than at least the ROSCON that I joined last year.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot.
And it was a very healthy mix of like half students and half working professionals. So
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't like it was mainly a university crowd, but yeah, we had people from all over. There were sponsors from chip vendor companies like Nvidia, Qualcomm. These guys came and presented. Analog Devices was there, and but a lot of actual working professionals who were working on real hard problems in the robotic space and otherwise, and students who are eager to like learn about different use cases. Somebody from Zetascale was there presenting about Xeno. So yeah, a bunch of cool
Mm-hmm.
new stuff.
Yeah, very cool. And I was there like was it were there also kind of a lot of people outside of India as well?
A few. Ricardo came from the
Yeah,
construct.
I saw.
He
Yeah.
he was there. Jeffrey Biggs was supposed to come, but I think he couldn't make it in the last moment because of visa issues.
Mm-hmm.
But not too many people from outside the country that I could see. It was mostly a lot of local participation, people coming from a couple of startups who were the organizers for the entire thing, Rig Beetle Lab. And there's Acceleration Robotics, I think, based in Spain and India, which does hardware acceleration, and they contribute to the hardware acceleration working group of ROS2. So
Mm-hmm.
those guys were one of the organizers, and yeah, it was mostly Indian folks, but India is a huge subcontinent, and it was crazy to see people coming in from all over the country itself. So I think that was an amazing event because until now, these guys had done local meetups in Bangalore, in Pune, in Delhi, and elsewhere. I think Hyderabad as well. So just to manage the logistics of everybody coming into the same city and presenting their work, and just really interesting sessions all around was a lot of fun.
All right, that's very good. Nice to hear. Then probably maybe perhaps like next year or the year after that there will be another ROSCON
Yeah.
India. It was such a success. That is really
Yeah,
great
yeah,
to.
for sure. Yeah.
All right, thanks for sharing. Is anybody else that would like to share anything in the group? Now's the time. No? All right, let's continue. So yeah, the retrospective looking back. So we officially started with this the ROS Area Community Working Group in we had I guess like officially in April. We already had like an explorative meeting before that. So that means is that we had a meeting every 2 weeks, and we managed to mostly keep that. So this is the 16th meeting so far. That's pretty good in 1 year. So like we had one startup meeting, we had 8 developer meetings, and 7 scientific presentations. So that's quite good. And then I have a couple of polls prepared, because at least from the ones that have attended those meetings, maybe you haven't attended all of those meetings. I would like to know, like, what were your favorites, at least like the meetings that were like the most useful for you. So let me just go ahead and launch the first poll. If you go to the, yeah, let's say the triangle, square, rounds, you will find the polls over there. I've just launched one there, so you can place your vote on which developer meeting you were, like, the most satisfied with, if you attended one. It's okay if you haven't attended all of them. Are you guys able to find it, the poll? Yeah. And Alexander, this is your first time. I don't know if you've seen any videos, then you can of course
I
select
don't
one of them.
vote. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I see
Yeah,
green, but
exactly.
I don't vote it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kirby.
Let's see. Okay, we've had 4 votes in total. Um, so I guess that's probably fine for now. Usually these polls are a bit handier in the big routes. Yeah, but I think that's fine for now. End the poll. All right, I will just end the poll so far. Let's say. So we have 5 votes already in, and it seems to be like that the latest developer meeting, is probably the most people that joined, was the 3D planning one in November. I guess that's probably the most useful also because people have already started contributing. But we also had a vote for the aerial autonomy stacks. It was the first one, the tutorial on education, and in October we also had a development meeting about simulation. So that's nice. All right. So then I have also a second poll that I'm going to activate because we had quite a lot of favorite guest presentations as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and launch that. So you guys can go ahead and vote for that. I've just put in, like, the title of the presentation, or what the presentation was about. There's now a second poll open. See that there's already a clear winner coming in. So I think we had 3 votes so far. I don't know if the other ones still haven't seen the other ones, or still want to go ahead and vote. But it seems so far that the most people thought that the autopilot and ROS, yeah, guest presentation, let's say, or actually, yeah, the SPY people that actually are contributing quite a lot to the working group. So that seems to be the winner here. So that's very good. Good job. All right. So that is kind of like a poll that I just started for now. So then it's kind of like, yeah, perhaps, like, to still look back to the presentation so far. Like, what for the people that have joined the meeting so far, like, how did you like how it went? Like, were the meetings interesting? Were they productive? I guess, like, we were mostly discussing things and not yet implementing things. Is there anybody else that would like to kind of like share anything about yeah, how the meetings went this year? Yes, go for it, Gil.
Yeah, so personally I didn't attend all of them, but I think that the professionalism and the consistency is definitely what impresses me the most about this group, right? Because there's a where it's not very easy to keep consistency when something is kind of volunteering, right? When you're not really getting paid for it, and getting a group of people to consistently do it for a long time, things typically fall apart. So I'm more impressed with the commitment for people to keep this going, and hopefully they'll keep going in the future. And obviously having so many different parties involved, right? So and also every with different parties, even like putting aside even conflicts of interest. For example, you have the Ducky Jones came out. They had absolutely no issues with meeting with BitCraze, right? With is even on paper is almost competitors, right? But it's just for the sake of having continuously learning and continuously learning from each other. For me, that's also quite a good thing. And thank you so much. So
All right, thanks a lot for sharing that information. But Mayank, go for it. I'm just going to go ahead and write a couple of things down. So first of all, I think consistent. That's the fact that we had consistency, the fact that we are sharing information among, let's say, competitors. It was, I guess, and yeah, thanks a lot for your nice words. Mayank, go for it.
Um, I think it's really commendable that we are spending so much time on the why we want to build something. I think we don't do that often enough, because whether it's about understanding the requirements when you're building a product, or in this case, how we want to frame the direction of the working group, I think it's commendable that we're taking a research oriented kind of mindset, which of course, Kim, you have experience by being in academia, but even Ramon and others who come from industry as well. Because I think as we become more experienced in the domain, implementation is fine. You put in hours and you get output. But being very convinced that, hey, this actually belongs as an activity inside the aerial working group, and maybe this is what we should prioritize. I think getting everyone on the same page about that through these meetings is a very good approach. And I think it shouldn't be that we pause this activity. We'll maybe reduce the scope of how much exploratory research we do about understanding the landscape and increase our implementation cadence. But in general, if as long as we don't lose sight of why we're doing, it's one of the biggest motivators to any individual who's choosing to join this effort. And I think that's a very good direction to take.
All right. Yeah, I guess that's kind of the reason why we started like with just discussing the topics without actually implementing them first, because like the aero robotics scheme of things were like the landscape is just so wide. It's like where do you want to go? Like we cannot really from the get-go start with 10 subcommittees and one
Yeah,
person per subcommittee. It's like there's no way to
yeah.
yeah. It's
And
kind of a recipe
maybe
for disaster.
exactly. And going forward, we could do something like, a double convergence kind of model, wherein, let's say, whatever we decide today are the first subcommittees we want to form and start working on. Then within that, we do a similar brainstorming that, hey, these are the solved problems within that topic or within that space. So we understand that landscape now zoomed in, and then we start like execution on those fronts. I think we could kind of replicate that model at different layers of abstraction or like different layers of detail.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's definitely the way to go. I would say like perhaps like I wouldn't say that's this meeting we're going to start really making subcommittees. I would say like let's keep the discussion completely open and maybe just have
Sure,
like
sure,
a
sure.
brainstorm indeed of which subcommittees we could form next year.
Yeah, 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 for
Um,
sure.
so we can just like keep an open mind, just put them all on the list, and then maybe next meeting we can kind of say like, okay, then now, now all things like let's be serious. Which subcommittees is actually something that we should actually start on.
Do the same
Yeah,
subcommittees make sense next year? Is the question.
yeah,
As
exactly.
we
After all the Christmas cheer, do we still want to do this? Yeah.
feel the same way.
All right, cool. Is anybody else that would like to add anything to that? Like, you know, how the meetings have gone so far, and what you have been missing, perhaps, like, you know, it's like we can have constructive criticism as well. Too many meetings, maybe too little. Let's see. All right. Perhaps I would maybe have a question for like the kind of the subcommittee that has kind of already started, which is 3D planning. So Reese is currently here, but let's say the other ones of the group is not here. But perhaps like maybe if you can comment on how do you think that it's going so far? Because it seems that you guys have been very productive these couple of months.
Yeah. Oh, hi, Kim. Yes, it's a shame Ryan and Jay aren't on. Well, Jay's done like a huge amount of work. Him and his team, and that they, you know, what we're really doing is adapting what they've already done to ROS2, and then on for Ryan and myself, making it available in ArduPilot. So in some ways, like a lot of the thought behind what needed to be done was already mapped out by many years of research by the Zurich group. And then on our side, what we've where we've got to so far is it's working pretty well in PX4 for ROS2 now. Well, it works well enough in simulation. And what we found on the ArduPilot side, that we need to have a look at our external control support for plane, which doesn't currently support the types of interface that we need to drive the 3D planner. So we're doing a little bit of work on that, using Mavros at the moment, because that's how the planner works. And where that's been useful is that we're then going to sort of looking at what we're doing with DDS and finding out. We've got kind of the RET 147 proposal on one hand, and then we've got actually what we need to do on the other one. And the difference between having a proposal and actually making it work is there is a gap. And I think as we go through putting it in place, we'll have some feedback to, I guess if there's a standards committee on messages and message types and things like that, we'll be able to offer some practical advice on what we found we needed to do in order to get it to work. And that's kind of where we are at the moment. So we're sort of probably over the next month or so, hopefully we'll be able to put the nonlinear planner that PX4 has into ArduPilot, and see if we can get that to work firstly, and then try and plumb that into our DDS offering, and that's quite good because we've got Ethernet support now in ArduPilot Master, so that's going to make quite a bit of difference in terms of the rate and amount of data we can push into the flight controller and retrieve back out of it. So I think there's a few things happening in parallel at the moment. Some of them I'm involved in, some of them are things that have been done by other groups. And hi, Mayank.
Yeah, I was just saying that another aspect is reproducibility that we're really trying to kind of bring forth with the 3D planning work. So
Yeah.
even though we're pushing for all the great stuff that Reese and Ryan have been working on ROS2, we are not really giving up on ROS1 yet in terms of at least allowing others who are more comfortable with ROS1 to try out the older work and make sure it just builds, because quite often we see that documentation rot sets in, the exact branch which was used to test, or for example, the dependencies weren't tagged or pinned properly, so the same build instructions don't work. So I made like a small contribution to at least just do a sanity check of the instructions, that stuff still builds on, let's say, an Ubuntu 20 system with ROS1, and we're trying to dockerize that part as well, so that in addition to, let's say, the functionalities which get added in ROS2, with ROS1 we also see like a basic working kind of POC that anybody could try out to get a feel for the planner and work with it, while the ROS2 stuff is still, let's say, being polished or integrated into the master branches of respective projects like RDPilot and others. So that's also something that we don't want to entirely give up on. while we are focusing on ROS2, like at least have something people can play with, and maybe somebody who just wants to focus on the planner or the controller can do so in a ROS1 environment as well, if they so choose to.
All right. Rich, did you want to comment on that or share something more about the group?
Yeah, no, it's ongoing. I mean, it's really welcome feedback. I mean, it's fairly kind of, it's not that easy to put it all together at the moment because it's all bits and pieces. But if anyone does have a chance to get it up and running, I'd be really interested to know how they get on, or if they've got any feedback on what works and what doesn't. That would be great to have. Otherwise, we're just going to carry on and see how far we can get with it.
I guess like the thing is I guess the danger now is because you guys are just started is that there's right now there's not already a lot of groups within this ROS Aerial community that is helping out, let's say, in the sense of like the reproducibility in the Docker images, for instance. That can be perhaps a topic that maybe like another group who is very interested in can work on, and that you can kind of work together on that. Because I think what Ryan told us last time when you guys gave the RDPilot presentation was that a lot of these things, I don't know about you, but Ryan said that he has to do a lot of things on the side next to his normal job for this work. So I guess like we have to kind of like find a way to make it doable for everybody while also of course next to anybody else's job, let's say. I guess like also my question was just like in terms of, because the 3D planning, like how you guys are doing 3D planning now is maybe also can serve as maybe how the other committees can communicate with each other and organize things with each other. Like you guys use a channel on Discord right now, or a thread in Discord to be on. And at least like Ryan is keeping up as some kind of project on the rest of ROS Aerial GitHub. Is that kind of working out so far to kind of keep oversight and keep communicating with each other?
Yeah, no, I think that works really well. So there's informal chats on Discord, and there's a couple of channels there. There's the one on the OSRF channel for the 3D planning, and then on RGPilot there's things that are particular to that. So we'll kind of bounce ideas around there. For the more formal structure, we've got the planning board, which we put issues and open PRs on, and then for the technical detail, that'll tend to go into an issue or a PR. We'll track things into that, because the Discord channels are, they're kind of good, but they're not so good as a permanent record. Whereas the GitHub issues and PRs have a lot more permanence and are more searchable, and you can put documents and other things there as well. So I think that works pretty well. And to get an overview of what's been done and how it's going, the project board has been really good for that. So we try and tag everything we can into the project board, and then at least you can have a see what's been done and what's pending and so on.
Nice. All right, that's good to hear. I'm just going to share the project board of the 3D planning as it looks so far, so that anybody that hasn't seen it yet can have kind of an idea of what we're talking about. So this is the ROS Aerial GitHub organization, and then projects and 3D planning, and then you can kind of like see what the current state of it is. And so this kind of has PRs from different projects, different organizations, all in one go. And that scene was, at least like I was able to kind of follow your progress, and you guys were very, very efficient with these. So that's very nice. So at least that you guys know that you can find these on the ROS Aerial, ROS-Aerial GitHub organization. We also have the ones for the meetings, which I don't use that often, but it's still nice to kind of see like how things have gone in this type of setup. All right. I think it's maybe good now we're halfway to actually start talking about the future. So let me just share the presentation again. I guess the first year we already had. I have another poll because we actually had quite a lot of topics. We were not able to finish all the discussion topics of the Aerial ROS meetings so far, but that's fine. I think we covered most important ones. But what I'm perhaps a little bit interested in as well, I'm going to start another poll, is let's say, which topic should we probably have another developer meeting about? Developer meeting. So I'll just launch one right now. So I've added all the topics that we have on the list, except for the last one because that didn't fit for some reason. I think the last one was perhaps also not a very interesting one. Let's say. Yeah, there was middleware and drivers. It's also very important. But if you like middleware and drivers, let's just add them to the chat if we need to have another developer presentation about that. We have 3 votes in so far. Alex is going for middleware options. Okay, I should have added those. I'm not able to change the poll anymore, but dearly noted. Yeah, because that's one of the things that we actually haven't had a meeting about. All right, I think we had 4 plus 2 votes, so 6 votes in total. Seems that we have 2 on drivers and middleware. So that is now on par with swarm communication and management, which we did already had a developer meeting about, but perhaps there weren't a lot of conclusive things about it yet. But and 1 vote for message standards and 1 vote for planning in 3D. Very good. Not saying that we're not, because I think the format as we had this year really much worked. So I'm still very much in favor of trying to, let's say, have every meeting before the new meeting decide which topic we're going to have the discussion about. And of course, like kind of think about how we're going to do it with the subcommittees, of course. Yeah, so that is perhaps something that we can marinate about. So I'll end the vote right there. But perhaps I have an idea of maybe maybe for our next guest presentation, which is not going to be the 6th of January or the 4th of January. It's going to be the one after that. So maybe have somebody that can tell more about that. Yeah, and now it's the completely. Let's see, where am I? Where is my presentation? Oh, there you go. Yeah, so okay, so let's just have right now a completely open discussion of what kind of subcommittees shall we form? Just like, just blurt it out there, like what would be useful subcommittees to form, or what would be another good topic to talk about for the next year. It's like this is going to be completely open, and then I'll probably try to comprise that for the next meeting to a bit more specific discussion topics. So
I think simulation definitely. I think it's an interesting enough topic, and there's a lot of variety to be done there. And yeah, like for example, even for the 3D planning stuff, if there's a simulation subcommittee which looks into maybe even Dockerizing GUI-based applications, so like how do you get Gazebo to work properly inside Docker for ROS 1 and 2 for people to try out, then it's kind of like a responsibility of the sim subcommittee, or like they kind of become the best if they've done the landscape mapping, they become the best people to specialize in telling us, hey, if you want to do this application, this one is working as of the bleeding edge of the nightly build yesterday. Like use this for swarms, use this for photorealistic simulation and all this. I think people may have like knowledge about one area, but not all. And if you have a subcommittee which focuses on all aspects of ROS aerial for simulation, that could be really important for everybody else to use.
Right. Yeah. Simulation. Yeah, I'm very, very much for that indeed. Like as Ryan also noticed the last last time, is that I'm a co-author of one of the newer review papers on aerial robotic simulation, and I would really want to kind of convert that to a nice overview of what people can use. However, what I've at least noticed from that is that there's also kind of like a very it's very unclear on what aerial simulation actually is. Let's say people are usually very confused. Like, what is kind of like, what is the rendering? What's the dynamics model? What is that? And to be honest, a lot of dynamics models and a lot of simulations are very simple. Too simple, perhaps, for some applications. Like wind gusts and things like that. It's not something that's being simulated quite a lot. So yeah, I guess like in terms of like modeling for those kinds of things, that they can definitely be improved. So environmental modeling.
Even if we had enough of an intuition to set up like a process flow, right? Let's say you're building a new craft, you try it out in the airworthiness simulator first, and then you go to like a simplified one which does your swarm simulation or something like that, and then let's say you use a third one. Even if you're using multiple tools initially and then you converge to like a common plugin into Gazebo or something, I think it's still worthy to just have recommendations which are tested for certain use cases.
Yeah. All right. I'm running it. For what simulator is useful? For what? Awesome. All right. So like, yeah, simulation subcommittee, check. What else should we have a subcommittee for, or should we have more meetings about?
Please, Kimber, I would like to complement the words of Meg. If it is possible to discussion too, the question of about the conversion of 3D cloud points to words in Gazebo, to planning the fly, something like that, if it's possible.
Clouds to planning in Gazebo. Great. I guess like in general, there's probably also kind of like how to do autonomy on aerial robotics, not only simulation, but perhaps also on the real thing as well.
Yes, that's exactly the idea.
Yeah, okay. And real. Because yeah, that was one of our first meetings that we had in the year, and then we had a nice list of like aerial autonomy stacks. But what I think, yeah, there's a lot of options out there, but it would be also nice, I would say, if, for instance, the committee that would form, for instance, like for aerial navigation, would also be maybe a kind of a link or glue between the current navigation ROS2 working group, let's say. That's actually what's like what we would rather want to have. But 3D planning, I guess, is also, there's a huge overlap. There's also navigation, but right now 3D planning is currently at least the guys that are working on 3D planning is mostly outdoor planning. So perhaps it might be good to make the distinction between outdoor planning or navigation and indoor planning navigation. I guess. I guess people agree. I see a thumbs up. Because yeah, I guess like 3D point clouds are, yeah, it's like for outdoor navigation. Isn't being used a lot, like lidars for outdoor navigation, aerial robotics?
As far as I know, maybe not navigation, but if you're scanning assets, like if you're going around a bridge and you're trying to create a digital twin for inspection, then their lidars are used. But because you can afford to have GPS, RTK, and like other sensors that you use, I don't think lidars are that common outdoors for just the navigation part of things.
Yeah, okay, so they don't use that fully for the navigational part, let's say. Like they can use it for the scanning part, but not necessarily for the localization. Yeah.
Yeah, Kim, I think it's also linked to the vehicle capabilities as well. So for planes, the planning the planner is operating on a much more constrained vehicle, whereas for indoor planning or outdoor planning for copters, where you might be doing structural surveys and things like that, then the vehicle has completely different capabilities. So I think the planner tends to go along with the vehicle type, as well as whether it's an indoor or outdoor environment, and whether you're dealing with kind of GPS denied or GPS enabled spaces as well. But yeah, but plane and copter tends to be really quite different, I think. For the planning we're looking at the moment is very much focused on like long distance vehicles, so planes as opposed to multi-rotors.
All right, so perhaps that's also kind of like the also a good topic to discuss, because that's one of the ones that we had on the list, but nobody's voted. Different vehicle types, support for different vehicle types is perhaps a committee or something that we can at least at least like have some kind of overview for, because we have like, of course, like the plane, and then quadcopter, and then we have octocopters with arms, we have octocopters with 3 arms, we have flapping wing MAVs. So
Quad tilt rotors.
yeah, so like
So
octocopters, flipping monocopters. So we also have like, is it also like, is it useful to have people to kind of like check what is being supported there, or is perhaps just support for quadcopters and planes is good enough? I know that the support for planes by itself is not that great in the robotics community, I've heard. Just for autonomous planes, like fixed wings. I don't know if that's true or not. At least from a simulation point of view.
Probably good in the flight stacks of like PX4 and ArduPilot, but probably less focus in ROS, I'd say.
Yeah,
but I think planes are well supported in the flight stacks. And I think the main difference between the vehicles is really the degrees of freedom that are available to them, rather than the actual kind of name of the vehicle. So so you might have like a VTOL plane, which in certain configurations has got quite a few degrees of freedom, but it's not really designed to be used for mission planning and that sort of design. And different multi-rotors with different numbers of motors and things, like they might have different fail-safe or redundancies, but they tend to have the same numbers of degrees of freedom available to them for planning purposes. So when looking at like how to organize it, it might be a good way of organizing it might be the number of degrees of freedom and the constraints that the vehicle has. And that gives you a kind of a slightly more abstract way of looking at it, but probably ties in more closely to the algorithms that the planners will be using.
All right, very good. So I'll write it all down. I guess, of course, like, you know, there's of course also the degrees of freedom that you can think about. But I guess like if you go for it's like to simulation, the modeling of, for instance, like a fixed wing is a bit different than, for instance, a fixed wing has maybe like in that sense like degrees of freedom because it cannot really hover in that sense. But for instance, like a quadcopter has very different dynamics than, for instance, a flapping wing MAV. Or like a flapping wing is, of course, like it's I wouldn't say to put that in ROS now, but I come from a lab that has flapping wing MAVs in their repertoire. But I'm just kind of like using as an example, like that has a completely different types of dynamics that they have to deal with. Yeah, so, but in that sense, like it can move around like quadcopter, so maybe perhaps it's also kind of like part of the point. All right.
I think the hybrid VTOL point was quite important, because there might just be people who decide to use like a hybrid approach where you have vertical takeoff and landing, and maybe some behaviors like a multi-rotor when you want very fine-grained control in space, maybe while landing and takeoff or in constrained environments. But for endurance, would switch to like several platforms which already exist. I think we've seen some parcel delivery aircrafts out there, and a bunch of others which would either have quad tilt rotors, or there'd be like VTOLs which have quadcopter kind of rotors to take off, and then like front motors to like become a plane when they go up. So like for endurance, then they would go into that behavior. So I think just having these classes in mind, which then control the behavior, and then ability to have hybrid models as well, which then would use a combination of those stacks, would be an important part to consider here. Because you won't, unlike the flight stacks, you might not just have just one behavior or the other. Your construction might allow for hybrids, and yeah.
Nice, very good. All right, so let me just kind of like see, like we were talking about, we need a better simulation subcommittee. For navigation, we need to look for subcommittees like the different types of vehicles, perhaps interesting, but maybe kind of like an overlap to multiple. How about a subcommittee also, like the something that has come back in a lot of these meetings was the fact that we don't really have a good standard drone or quadcopter that people can use to kind of like retest the ideas, like the turtle drone, let's say. We like I guess, like, you know, is that something that we would like to have a committee on, that might, like, you know, that's pulls a couple of companies together and that we all kind of like discuss together, like what would be the specification of something like that. I would say something that's open hardware, obviously. But yeah, what do you guys think about something like that?
May I ask, like, what's actually missing from, like, for example, the Holybro X500? Is it because the PICs, like, what is actually missing in terms of, because I've seen quite a few people around me that use that as a dev platform before they actually build something.
I would say that it really depends on the lab, I would say, because the Holybro, for instance, is not something that you maybe can use like very easily, like in a course, in terms of like it's a pretty big platform, isn't it?
I mean, I guess it's big is subjective. For me, it's quite tiny. But
yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for like I guess like I'm used to these types of drones. So a Holybro is kind of like a massive giant in my eyes. But I guess like what makes the like, for instance, like the turtle bots, like why are so many people using that? And that's still a pretty big one, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah, I have my 2 cents. I think
Oh yeah,
also,
sorry. Yeah.
yeah, when we talked last time about it, right? So if you look at the different people who use the Holybro drone, they use it also in different ways, right? So they have like different cases, right? So yeah, you can have a PX4 Pixhawk, you know, flight controller, but you can also attach a Raspberry Pi to it. For a payload controller, you can attach a Jetson Nano, right? And that's typically what the ROS is going to run. You can configure it in many different ways, so it's not, I guess, standardized. But so I guess there isn't really a there is no middle ground for that. You know what I mean? Yeah, the even the Holybros 500, it's not like it's part of the, I guess, drone code foundation stuff. It's kind of independent. It's almost it's independent thing, right? So yeah, even, you know, the simulation, you know, if you want to get up and started with the Holybro I guess kit, you know, the ROS documentation doesn't have that. It doesn't have something similar with like that Turtlebot, you know, 2D sim, right? So um
Yes, that is also a good point indeed. Because like if there's a standardized drone out there, it's not standardized for ROS, let's say.
yeah.
So that's definitely a good point, because yeah. And I guess like, yeah, the different use cases is also kind of like an interesting one. Because like how, like have anybody of you actually used the Turtlebot for their research in the past or something like that? Because I've never had. You, Maya?
I have. Yeah,
Yeah?
I actually started ROS on a Turtlebot and it was clunky as hell. There was a damn laptop on it and that shook me up because I was like, there was like a small netbook that had to go on there with a big ass Kinect. And that brings me to like thinking back on how we've progressed over the years. I think the size of the bots that you can use in the ROS context, because I think we're in some way or another trying to do autonomy, is driven by how big does your compute unit have to be and heavy because this thing's going to fly. So that also decides the battery, the motors, the powertrain. And then what all do you want it to do? So like what are the sensors and how heavy do they get? Because if you're going to put a 3D camera from today, you might have something like an OAK-D or an Intel RealSense, which is way lighter than the first Kinect when it came out, right? So you can afford to make things much lighter and better in that sense. But then depending on the degree of autonomy you want to play with, you might just be okay with the crazy fly. If you have a central control base station which has visibility, you're just doing maybe wall following or basic obstacle detection, that's a good enough model to start. But let's say if you want to do VSLAM, you want to do like VIO, doing it indoors, then there is probably going to be at least a Raspberry Pi on that thing, or maybe a Jetson Nano to do like some good computer vision stuff. So that automatically starts scaling up the size of the platform. So your sensor suite, your compute directly kind of influences the size of the platform. Although I do appreciate Kim's point about open hardware, and for me that need not be mean open hardware in like the full compliance sense of open schematics or layouts, but just transparency about the components which went in, so it's easy in terms of reproducibility. So I one of my first PRs onto like the aerial robotic community landscape repo was about just doing a deconstruction of all the parts and the specs that Holy Brew has put into the S500. And that was because I wasn't sure if I would be able to procure the entire kit here in India. And what if I had to get a motor from a different vendor, or if I wanted to get equivalent props? So I just wanted to do like a deconstruction of that. Similarly, the DJI old F405, like that, I'm forgetting that red and white kind of quadcopter is a similar platform which became very popular in India and universities. And that's cloned so heavily, like the first Arduino Uno clones, that it's easier to get that. So if we have things which are transparent or platforms where we can clearly spec out like what does the motor rating look like, what's the battery rating like, what's the AC like, then you're not dependent on one vendor or one distributor for like recreating that platform. And I think that has immense value.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. Of course, I guess like it's going to be quite difficult for manufacturers to remanufacture a drone just based on, let's say, open specs instead of open hardware. But of course, like there's many that try, of course, and I think at least like what's happening in a lot of labs, at least, is that they're recreating. Like either they're using a platform like the Holy Bear already, but what I see more is that people make their own drone, let's say. Perhaps because that platform is not good for them, or perhaps they have totally different specifications. So perhaps like, we can have a committee that kind of like investigates in that and like why is that necessary for them to recreate it, even though there's already a good platform out there. Is it too expensive? Is it too heavy? Like, it would be nice to at least have people that look into that perhaps Holy Bro can also learn from. Like anybody can join in this sense. Because what we want is not necessarily to have one company make the drone that rules them all. No, it's just that somebody somewhere can make drones that multiple people can use and reuse. Yeah, that is kind of like the hope. And of course, like secretly, we want BitCraze to make this model. No, not really, because the Crazy Flight is too small for that. It's cool, but it's not handy for like, the multiple like ROS things. So it would be much nicer if we have multiple companies that will work on this together for a true open hardware platform, perhaps based on something that already exists. But let's see. That's me being very hopeful. Okay, yeah, we have still 5 minutes left before we can start the the Mozilla Hubs party. Is there anything else that we would like to that's needs more attention, let's say, from the aerial community for the ROS the ROS people or vice versa. Mayank, go for it.
Communication. I think message standards as they're evolving, but also like communication with respect to a base station, or if it's a swarm of drones between each other. So telemetry versus, because with increased autonomy and swarm, a lot of the conventional communication modalities we've had might not be good enough. So as you have more and more robots in the air, how they talk to like a UTM, or how what information do they share with each other, like there's a lot of good stuff which has happened in terms of design with self-driving cars in the past, with like the IEEE working groups for things like vehicle to vehicle communication, vehicle to infra communication. I think there's a lot to be learned from that space, which might be directly useful here. And the reason why it might belong in ROS Aerial is because we have the additional resource constraint of doing this while flying. So there's Doppler effects, doing this with less battery than like a huge ground robot. So we might not have the same luxuries as other hardware. So there could be a special set of constraints which come into our communication stacks compared to others. And also from the perspective of safety and redundancy and reliability for sure.
All right. I'll just write that down. Constraints based on our vehicle. I'm very glad for the transcript here. I'm so bad at just making notes at the same time. But this is just like for the purpose of the video itself. Based on our vehicles, can be limitations. Yeah, that's also very good. I guess like maybe just in the last couple of minutes, maybe somebody else has any ideas of other things that we should really focus on. Documentation came back everyone's perhaps like tutorials and yeah, let's say education in this sense. Although I have compiled a very big list of a lot of courses that on aerial robotics already. So maybe we don't need that. Maybe. Tutorial hackathon, yeah, that is also very yeah, so like you mean hacking around to make a tutorial to all together, like that we just make tutorials in that sense. Is that what you mean? Oh, okay, cool. I also think that this is also the about talking about education tutorial. There is like also a community or actually working group within ROS that started for education itself. So we can also kind of say like, okay, perhaps we can wait a little bit until see what they come up with, and then we try to have like the aerial robotics education to kind of be formatted in that form, let's say, because they also just started like a few months ago. Right, anybody else that wants to chip in? We only have 1 minute left, so not a lot of time. Probably next meeting we'll also be talking about this more in specific, I would say, based on what we've already discussed so far. Since we're kind of close to time, I'm just going to call it already. Let's see, like let me just add the link to the Mozilla hubs so we can go ahead and chat further in there for our Christmas spirits. So I will also share this in the chats. So here you go. So after the meeting, we're going to join there. And yeah, so it's just like a 3D open spatial chat where you can kind of talk with each other in a more like comfortable way. So the next meeting is going to be on Wednesday, the 3rd of January. So the next year. So still 3 p.m. Universal Time. And like kind of like the topic getting started, kind of going on with the discussion that we had before, but perhaps like more in a serious manner, and perhaps like where can we put the priority first? Where can we start first to maybe have a committee over? So, all right. Also like to remind you of I already showed that before, like the github.com ROS-Aerial as well. I'm seeing a lot of happy faces, a lot of celebrations. I can hardly see my slides even. So the GitHub organization has their aerial robotic landscape, so you can be like Mayank and add PRs. And yeah, also add yourself as a member. And if you want to do your own presentation about your specific topic in aerial robotics, please send an email to me, Kimberly at bitscrace.io, or Ramon. Here is the email addresses so far. So, okay. So anybody that would like to join in the Mozilla Hubs, I'll see you there. For now, I'll just close off this meeting. And if I don't see you again, have a great winter holidays and a happy new year. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.